I was sitting in a plastic chair in the kitchen of my own wedding venue, staring at a wall of stainless steel pots while 200 guests laughed and danced just beyond the swinging doors. My future mother-in-law had just informed me, with a smile so fake it could crack porcelain, that the kitchen was where I belonged until they needed me for photos. I had paid for every single detail of this wedding. Every flower arrangement, every champagne bottle, every note the band would play. And now I was being treated like a servant in my own celebration. That's when I pulled out my phone and made 3 calls that would change everything. If you're enjoying this story and want to see how far I took my revenge, please hit that subscribe button right now. We're working hard to reach 1,000 subscribers, and your support means the world to us. Just click that red button below and become part of this community. My name is Margaret Hayes, and I'm 47 years old. I live in Portland, Oregon, where the rain falls more days than not, and the coffee shops outnumber the churches. I work as a senior accountant at a mid-sized firm downtown, the kind of job that pays well enough to afford a comfortable life, but not so well that people assume you're rich. I've always been practical, organized, and fair-minded. My colleagues describe me as someone who dots every I and crosses every T. My friends say I'm loyal to a fault. My family, well, they've always seen me as the responsible one, the problem solver, the person who picks up the pieces when everyone else makes a mess. I met Thomas Brennan 3 years ago at a charity auction for the local children's hospital. He was bidding on a weekend at a coastal resort, and I was there representing my firm, which had donated a financial planning package. Thomas was tall, with graying temples and kind brown eyes that crinkled when he smiled. He worked as a civil engineer, designing bridges and road systems. We started talking during the cocktail hour, and I found myself genuinely interested in his stories about infrastructure and city planning. Most people's eyes glaze over when you mention spreadsheets and tax codes, but Thomas listened like I was describing adventures in exotic lands. Our courtship was mature and unhurried. We went to wine tastings, took weekend trips to the coast, and spent quiet evenings reading in companionable silence. Neither of us had been married before. I'd been engaged once in my 20s, but that had ended when I discovered my fiancé was more interested in my paycheck than my personality. Thomas had come close a few times but said he'd never met someone who understood both his need for independence and his desire for partnership until he met me. We complemented each other perfectly. He was creative, where I was analytical. He was spontaneous, where I was planned. We balanced each other. When Thomas proposed, he did it simply and sincerely on a hiking trail overlooking the Columbia River Gorge. No flash mob, no elaborate scheme, just him on one knee with a ring his grandmother had worn, asking if I would share the rest of my life with him. I said yes, without hesitation. I was 46 years old, and I had finally found someone who saw me as a complete person, not just a role to fill or a problem to solve. That's when I met his family. Thomas's mother, Patricia Brennan, was a force of nature in the worst possible way. She was 69 years old, a retired high school principal who had spent decades telling teenagers what to do and apparently never stopped that behavior when she left the profession. She had opinions about everything from the proper way to fold towels to the correct voting patterns for municipal elections. Thomas's father had passed away 5 years earlier from a heart attack, and since then, Patricia had transferred all her considerable energy and need for control onto her only son. Thomas also had a sister, Caroline, who was 2 years younger than him. Caroline worked as a real estate agent and had inherited their mother's forceful personality, along with her sharp cheekbones and piercing blue eyes. Caroline had been married twice, both times to men who eventually couldn't handle the Brennan family dynamics and quietly exited stage left. She had no children and seemed to view Thomas as her personal project. The two of them spoke on the phone at least 3 times a week, and Caroline had a key to Thomas's apartment that she used liberally, often showing up unannounced with decorating ideas or meal plans she thought he should follow. Our first dinner with Patricia and Caroline should have been a warning sign. We met at an upscale Italian restaurant in the Pearl District, the kind of place where the pasta costs $30 and comes in portions that would make a sparrow feel satisfied. Patricia arrived first, already seated at the table she'd chosen, and immediately commented on my outfit. "Oh, Margaret, you wore black. How funereal. Thomas never mentioned you had such somber taste. I was wearing a simple black dress with a pearl necklace, perfectly appropriate for an evening dinner, but apparently not cheerful enough for Patricia's standards. Throughout the meal, Patricia asked invasive questions about my salary, my retirement accounts, my health history, and my plans for children. When I politely explained that at 46, children weren't likely in my future, she made a face like she'd bitten into a lemon. Well, that's probably for the best. Thomas needs to focus on his career, not diapers. Caroline spent most of the dinner on her phone, occasionally looking up to make comments about how Thomas deserved someone who could keep up with his active lifestyle. I ran 3 miles every morning, but apparently that wasn't active enough. Thomas held my hand under the table and apologized later. They're protective, he said. Give them time to get to know you. They'll see what I see. I wanted to believe him. I really did. If this story is resonating with you, please take a moment to click that subscribe button. We're building a community here, and every subscriber brings us closer to our goal of 1,000. Your support makes these stories possible. The engagement period was a battlefield disguised as wedding planning. Thomas and I wanted a small, intimate ceremony, maybe 50 people at most, a garden setting, simple but elegant. We'd both been to enough overwrought weddings to know that bigger wasn't better. We wanted our wedding to reflect who we were as a couple, thoughtful, genuine, and focused on what mattered. Patricia had other ideas. The first planning meeting happened at her house in the West Hills, a sprawling craftsman-style home with a view of downtown Portland and Mount Hood in the distance. She had already created a 3-ring binder filled with magazine clippings, venue options, and a guest list that numbered well over 200 people. A wedding is a family event, she announced, setting the binder down on the coffee table with a thud. It's about bringing people together and celebrating the Brennan family legacy. I pointed out gently that it was also about celebrating Thomas and me starting our own family. Patricia smiled that brittle smile and said, "Of course, dear. But you're marrying into the Brennan family, so really it's all the same thing." Caroline nodded enthusiastically and started showing me pictures of bridesmaid dresses she'd selected. I hadn't even asked her to be a bridesmaid yet, but apparently that decision had been made for me. The venue discussion became heated. Thomas and I had found a perfect garden venue on Sauvie Island, a beautiful spot surrounded by farmland and flowers, with the option for an outdoor ceremony and a rustic barn reception. It held 75 people comfortably. Patricia dismissed it immediately. Too small, too rustic, too far from a city. Half our guests won't want to drive that far. We need something elegant and accessible. She had already scheduled tours at 3 different hotels downtown, all with ballrooms that could hold 200-plus guests. I should have put my foot down right then. I should have said no clearly and firmly. But I was trying to be understanding. Patricia had lost her husband, and Thomas was her only son. Maybe she needed this wedding to be big and elaborate because it represented something important to her. Maybe I could compromise and still have a day that felt meaningful. That was my first mistake, thinking that compromise with Patricia Brennan was possible. Over the next 6 months, every decision became a negotiation that I inevitably lost. The venue became the Grand Rose Hotel downtown, a beautiful but impersonal space with crystal chandeliers and burgundy carpeting. The guest list ballooned to 215 people, most of whom I'd never met. Patricia's former colleagues, distant Brennan relatives, Caroline's real estate connections, people from their country club. Thomas and I were allowed to invite 30 people combined. My small circle of friends and my own family were vastly outnumbered by the Brennan contingent. The menu was chosen by Patricia. She selected prime rib and salmon, both prepared in a style she preferred, despite the fact that Thomas didn't eat much red meat and I was pescatarian. When I suggested a vegetarian option for guests who might want it, Caroline laughed and said, "This isn't a hippie commune wedding, Margaret. We're serving real food." The cake was ordered by Patricia from her favorite bakery. White fondant with elaborate sugar flowers, traditional and formal. Thomas and I had wanted a simple buttercream cake with fresh berries, but Patricia insisted that fondant photographed better. The flowers were chosen by Caroline, who had a friend in the floral design business. Roses and calla lilies in white and deep red, arranged in towering centerpieces that would make conversation across the tables nearly impossible. I had hoped for wildflowers and ranunculus in soft colors, something natural and romantic. Caroline patted my hand and said, "Trust me, I know what works. You'll thank me when you see the photos." Even my wedding dress became a point of contention. I found a beautiful gown at a boutique in Northwest Portland, a simple silk sheath with delicate lace sleeves and a flowing train. It was elegant and age-appropriate, and I felt beautiful in it. When I showed pictures to Patricia and Caroline at one of our planning meetings, Caroline wrinkled her nose. "It's a bit plain, isn't it? You want to make a statement." Patricia suggested I try on something with more beading, more drama, more everything. I kept my dress choice, but stopped sharing details with them. Small rebellions felt like victories. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you're following along with the story. We're so close to reaching 1,000 subscribers, and each one of you helps us grow this community. Click that red button right now and join us. The financial arrangements were where things got truly ugly. Thomas and I had agreed early on that we would pay for our own wedding. We were both professionals with good incomes and savings. We didn't want or need our families to contribute, and we felt that paying for it ourselves gave us the right to make our own decisions. That was my second mistake, thinking that paying for something meant you controlled it. When we informed Patricia and Caroline that we were covering all costs, Patricia's expression shifted in a way that should have alarmed me. "How generous," she said slowly. "That's very modern of you. Of course, since you're paying, you'll want to make sure everything is absolutely perfect. I'm happy to help coordinate and ensure quality." I heard what she said. I didn't hear what she meant. She wasn't offering to help. She was announcing that she would be in charge regardless of who signed the checks. As the wedding date approached, I paid deposit after deposit. $5,000 for the venue, $8,000 for the catering, $3,000 for the flowers, $2,500 for the band, $1,500 for the photographer, $2,000 for the bar service. The numbers added up quickly. My savings account, carefully built over years of careful planning, began to drain. Thomas contributed equally, selling some stock options and using a bonus he'd received at work. Together, we were spending close to $45,000 on a wedding that barely felt like ours. Every vendor I contacted had already been contacted by Patricia or Caroline. They all greeted me pleasantly, but seemed to defer to Patricia's preferences. The florist would start to discuss my ideas and then say, "Well, Mrs. Brennan Sr. suggested." The caterer presented menus that Patricia had already approved. Even the band had a playlist that Caroline had created, filled with big band standards and classic rock, none of the jazz and indie music Thomas and I loved. I raised these concerns with Thomas multiple times. He was sympathetic but ultimately passive. "It's just a few songs, Maggie. It's just flowers. In the end, we'll be married, and that's what matters." He wasn't wrong, but he also wasn't acknowledging how diminished I felt. This wedding had become a performance directed by his mother and sister, and I was just a prop in an elaborate show designed to showcase the Brennan family's taste and connections. The week before the wedding, I had a breaking point that I almost acted on. We had a final meeting at the hotel to confirm details. Patricia, Caroline, Thomas, and I sat in the events office with the wedding coordinator, a patient woman named Sarah who'd probably seen every family dynamic imaginable. Patricia was discussing the reception timeline when she casually mentioned that she'd rearranged the seating chart. "I put your mother at table 12, she said, not looking at me. "She'll be more comfortable there with some of the older guests." Table 12 was at the back of the room, partially obscured by a pillar. My mother was originally seated at table 3, near the head table where Thomas and I would be sitting. I had carefully arranged for my mother to be close by, along with my closest friends. My father had passed away when I was in college, and my mother had been my rock through every challenge in my life. She deserved a seat of honor. "Why would you change that?" I asked, trying to keep my voice level. Patricia blinked as if surprised by my question. "Because the Brennan family elders should be nearest to you. It's traditional. Your mother will understand." I looked at Thomas, waiting for him to say something, to defend me, to acknowledge how wrong this was. He shifted uncomfortably and said, "Maybe we can find a compromise?" A compromise. Between my mother being honored at my wedding and my mother being hidden at the back. I felt something crack inside me. I excused myself and went to the ladies' room where I locked myself in a stall and cried angry tears. I called my best friend, Laura, and told her everything. "Don't marry him," she said bluntly. "If he can't stand up to his mother now, he never will. You're signing up for a lifetime of this." I wanted to argue with her, but I couldn't find the words. When I returned to the meeting, I quietly insisted that my mother's seat be restored. Patricia sighed dramatically but agreed, making it clear she thought I was being difficult. Are you still with me? If you want to hear how this all plays out, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Just click that subscribe button below. We're building something special here, and we'd love to have you as part of our community on the way to 1,000 subscribers. The wedding day arrived on a surprisingly sunny September Saturday. Portland in September can be unpredictable, but we got lucky with clear skies and temperatures in the mid-70s. I should have been excited. I should have been glowing with happiness. Instead, I felt like I was preparing for battle. I got ready at the hotel with my bridesmaids, 3 close friends who'd known me for years and could see the strain in my eyes even under the professional makeup. "You can still back out," my friend Rachel whispered while the photographer was busy with detail shots of my dress. "We can be in my car and halfway to Seattle before anyone knows you're gone." I laughed, but it sounded hollow. "I love Thomas," I said. "I'm marrying Thomas, not his family." Rachel squeezed my hand, but looked unconvinced. The ceremony was scheduled for 4 o'clock in the hotel's garden courtyard, a small outdoor space with a stone fountain and manicured hedges. Despite Patricia's efforts to make it grand, this part of the day was still relatively intimate. As I walked down the aisle on my brother's arm, my father being gone and my brother having graciously stepped in, I focused on Thomas's face. He was smiling, tears in his eyes, looking at me like I was the only person in the world. In that moment, I remembered why I was doing this. I loved him. I wanted to build a life with him. His family was difficult, but we would set boundaries after the wedding. We would create our own space. The ceremony was beautiful. Our officiant, a friend of Thomas's from college who'd become a minister, spoke about partnership and respect and building a life together. We exchanged vows we'd written ourselves, promising to support each other's dreams and face challenges together. When Thomas slipped the ring on my finger, I felt a surge of hope. Maybe everything would be okay. Maybe I was worrying too much. The reception was held in the grand ballroom, a cavernous space with those crystal chandeliers and burgundy carpet I mentioned. 215 people filled the round tables, creating a sea of faces, most of them strangers to me. My small group of family and friends was scattered throughout, outnumbered and overwhelmed by the Brennan family network. The cocktail hour had been pleasant, with past appetizers and champagne, everyone mingling and congratulating us. That's when the seating situation for the reception became clear. The head table was positioned on a raised platform at the front of the room. Thomas and I were in the center, with Patricia on Thomas's right, Caroline next to her, and then Caroline's date, some real estate developer she was seeing. On my left was supposed to be my mother, then my brother and his wife. But when we approached the table, I saw that Patricia had made one more change without telling me. My mother's place card was gone. In its place was Patricia's sister, Aunt Diane, a woman I'd met once at a strained lunch where she'd spent the entire time talking about her poodles. My mother's name was on a place card at table 8, far from the head table, surrounded by people she didn't know. I felt my face flush hot. "Where's my mother supposed to sit?" I asked Patricia, trying to keep my voice from shaking. Patricia was arranging her napkin in her lap, not meeting my eyes. "I thought you'd want Thomas's Aunt Diane close by. She's family now." "Your mother indicated she'd be fine wherever we put her." That was a lie. My mother hadn't been asked anything. I looked at Thomas, who was staring at his plate, clearly aware of the situation but unwilling to confront his mother. The bandleader was announcing that dinner would be served shortly. Guests were finding their seats. The photographer was setting up for shots of us at the head table. I made a decision. I stood up, walked around the table, and approached my mother where she stood near table 8 looking confused and hurt. Mom, you're sitting at the head table. Come with me. I took her hand and led her back to the platform. I removed Aunt Diane's place card, handed it to a passing server, and seated my mother in the chair that should have been hers all along. Patricia's face went white, then red. Margaret, this is inappropriate. You can't just rearrange the seating at the last minute. I looked at her directly for the first time all day, with complete clarity. Actually, I can. I paid for every seat at this wedding. My mother sits at the head table. Caroline opened her mouth to say something, but I held up my hand. Not another word. This is not negotiable. The room had gone quiet. People were watching. Thomas was frozen, looking between his mother and me like a deer caught in headlights. The photographer awkwardly started taking pictures, and gradually, conversation resumed. Aunt Diane was relocated to table 3, where she spent the evening happily talking about her poodles with some of Patricia's former teaching colleagues. My mother sat beside me, squeezing my hand under the table, and I felt a small measure of control return. If you're enjoying this drama, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Hit that button and help us reach our goal of 1,000 subscribers. We've got more stories like this coming, and you won't want to miss them. Dinner was served, though I barely tasted it. The prime rib was cooked perfectly, the salmon was delicate, but everything felt like sawdust in my mouth. Patricia and Caroline weren't speaking to me. They smiled for photos, but their eyes were cold. Thomas made small talk with his aunt, avoiding the tension like it was a live wire. Other guests seemed to be enjoying themselves, unaware of the family war being waged at the head table. After dinner, the toasts began. Thomas's best friend gave a funny speech about their college days and how Thomas had always said he'd never get married until he met someone who could beat him at chess. I'd beaten him on our 3rd date. My maid of honor, Laura, gave a touching speech about friendship and finding someone who sees you for who you really are. Then Patricia stood up. No one had approved Patricia giving a toast. It wasn't on the program. But she stood up, microphone in hand, provided by a helpful server, and began to speak. I'd like to say a few words about my son, she started, and the room fell silent. For the next 5 minutes, Patricia told stories about Thomas's childhood, his achievements, his father's pride in him. She talked about the Brennan family values, the importance of tradition, and how she'd always known Thomas would marry someone who understood what it meant to be part of their family. She never mentioned my name. Not once. She referred to me as Thomas's bride, and the woman who will carry on the Brennan name. She made it sound like I was an accessory to their family story, not a person with my own identity. When she finished, people applauded politely, but I could see confusion on many faces. It had been a strange toast, more about Patricia than about us as a couple. Thomas looked uncomfortable, but didn't say anything. Caroline also stood up, microphone in hand. Her toast was shorter, but equally pointed. She talked about how close she and Thomas were, how they'd always been there for each other, and how she hoped that marriage wouldn't change their special bond. She ended with, "Welcome to the family, Margaret. We have high standards, but I'm sure you'll learn." The condescension was barely veiled. I gripped my champagne glass, so hard I was surprised it didn't shatter. When both toasts were done, I looked at Thomas and waited for him to say something, to acknowledge how inappropriate both speeches had been, to stand up for me. He patted my hand and whispered, "They mean well. They're just emotional." That's when something inside me finally snapped completely. They mean well. As if intent excused impact. As if being emotional gave them the right to humiliate me at my own wedding. The bandleader announced the first dance, and Thomas led me to the dance floor. We swayed to At Last by Etta James, a song Patricia had selected. I had wanted The Way You Look Tonight by Frank Sinatra, but apparently my opinion on our first dance song hadn't mattered. As we danced, I looked around the room at all these people I didn't know, at the decorations I hadn't chosen, at the family that was making it clear I would never be one of them. Not really. I was tired. I was angry. And I was done being accommodating. After the first dance, protocol dictated the father-daughter dance. Since my father was gone, I'd planned a dance with my brother. But Patricia had informed me weeks ago that Thomas would dance with her first, because it's more traditional for the groom to dance with his mother at this point in the evening. So I stood at the edge of the dance floor and watched Thomas dance with Patricia while she beamed like she was the bride. Other guests joined them on the dance floor, and I found myself standing alone. That's when Patricia's sister approached me, Aunt Diane, the woman who'd briefly stolen my mother's seat. "You handle that seat situation very ungraciously," she informed me, her voice low enough that only I could hear. "Patricia was trying to honor me, and you embarrassed her in front of everyone. A real lady would have accepted her hostess's decisions with grace." I stared at her. "I'm not a guest," I said clearly. "I'm the bride. And Patricia is not the hostess. I paid for this wedding." Aunt Diane sniffed. "Money doesn't buy class, dear." Then she walked away, leaving me standing there shaking with anger. That was the moment I walked off the dance floor and through the side door that led to the service areas of the hotel. I needed air. I needed space. I needed to figure out what I was going to do with the rest of my evening and possibly the rest of my life. Make sure you're subscribed to see how I handled what came next. Just click that subscribe button right below this video. Every subscription helps us reach our goal of 1,000, and we're getting closer every day thanks to viewers like you. The service corridor was quiet, a stark contrast to the noise of the reception. The walls were plain white, lined with doors marked for kitchen, storage, and staff areas. I walked aimlessly, my heavy dress rustling against the floor, my heels clicking on the linoleum. I ended up near the kitchen entrance, where servers were coming and going with trays of food and empty plates. One of them, a young woman with kind eyes, stopped and asked if I was okay. "I'm fine," I lied automatically. Then I laughed bitterly. "No, I'm not fine. I'm at my own wedding, and I feel like a stranger." She smiled sympathetically. "Family weddings can be tough. You need anything? Water? A minute alone." I was about to say no when Caroline appeared at the end of the corridor. "Margaret, what are you doing back here? People are asking where the bride is. You're being rude to the guests." Something in the way she said it, the entitled tone, the assumption that I was the problem, the complete lack of awareness about how they'd treated me all day, made my decision for me. I looked at Caroline and said very calmly, "I'm done." She blinked. "Done with what?" I smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. "Everything. I'm done with this reception, done with pretending everything is fine, and done with being treated like an inconvenience at my own wedding." I pulled out my phone and looked at the time. It was 7:30. The reception was supposed to run until 11. 3.5 more hours of this torture. 3.5 more hours of watching Patricia and Caroline hold court, of being ignored and dismissed, of watching my husband choose his mother's comfort over my dignity. No. I was done. I had paid for this wedding. Every single element of it was in my name or Thomas's on the contracts, which meant I could cancel every single element if I wanted to. I walked past Caroline, who was sputtering something about me being unreasonable, and headed toward the hotel's events office. Sarah, the wedding coordinator, was at her desk reviewing timelines for the next day's event. She looked up, surprised to see me. "Mrs. Brennan, is everything okay? Do you need something adjusted?" I sat down across from her and said, "I need to cancel the rest of my wedding reception." Sarah's expression was carefully professional, but I could see the surprise in her eyes. "Cancel? I'm not sure I understand." I took a breath and explained as clearly as I could. "The band is scheduled to play until 11. I want them stopped now. The bar is open until 11. I want it closed now. The dessert service was supposed to happen at 9. Cancel it. The late-night coffee service at 10. Cancel it. Keep the tables and chairs. Obviously people need somewhere to sit, but I want everything else shut down." Sarah looked at her computer screen, then back at me. "Mrs. Brennan, I need to be honest with you. Some of those vendors have contracts that don't allow for cancellation at this point. You might not get refunds." I nodded. "I'm aware. I don't care about refunds. I paid for all of this. I'm choosing to end it early. Is that legal? Can I do that?" Sarah hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Yes, you can. It's your event, your contracts. But are you sure? This is a big decision. Maybe you and your husband should discuss it. I laughed, and it sounded slightly unhinged even to my own ears. My husband is dancing with his mother and hasn't noticed I've been gone for 15 minutes. I'm sure. Sarah looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something like understanding cross her face. Maybe she'd seen situations like this before. Maybe she recognized the desperation of a bride who'd been pushed too far. Okay, she said quietly. Give me 10 minutes to make the calls. While Sarah contacted vendors, I made my own calls. First, I called the band leader's cell phone. He answered on the second ring, sounding jovial. Mrs. Brennan. Great party. We're ready for the mother-son dance whenever you are. I said, actually, I need you to pack up after the song. The reception is ending early. You'll still get your full payment, but I don't need you to play anymore. There was a pause. Is everything all right? I didn't answer the question. Thank you for your work tonight. Please pack up quietly. Next, I called the bar service manager. Same conversation. Yes, they get full payment. No, I didn't need them to continue service. They could leave as soon as they'd cleaned up their current station. The man on the phone was confused but professional. Whatever you need, ma'am. We'll be discreet. Finally, I called the florist's emergency line. I explained that I wanted the centerpieces removed from the tables immediately. No, there wasn't a problem with the flowers. Yes, I understood they were beautiful. I just wanted them gone. Sarah came back to her office, looking slightly shell-shocked. It's done. The band has been notified through official channels, the bar is closing, and the dessert service has been canceled. The catering staff will still provide water and soft drinks, and the tables will remain, but all other services are ending. She paused. I have to ask, are you going to tell the guests what's happening? I thought about it.
No.
Let them figure it out. I stood up and smoothed my dress.
Thank you, Sarah.
I appreciate your help. She gave me a small smile. For what it's worth, I've been doing weddings for 12 years. I've seen a lot of family dynamics. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself is set a boundary, even if other people don't understand it. I felt tears prick my eyes, but blinked them away. I'd cried enough today. Now it was time for action. If you're still following this story, please hit that subscribe button. We're so close to 1,000 subscribers, and your support means everything. Click that red button now and join our community. I returned to the reception through the main entrance, not the service corridor. The band was playing The Way You Make Me Feel by Michael Jackson, and the dance floor was crowded with guests. Patricia was sitting at the head table, holding court with a group of her friends. Caroline was on the dance floor with her date. Thomas was standing near the bar, talking to one of his work colleagues. He saw me enter and smiled, relieved. He started walking toward me, but I held up a hand to stop him. I walked to the bandleader and whispered something in his ear. He nodded and made a discreet signal to his band members. They finished the song. Then the bandleader announced, "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for celebrating with a happy couple tonight. We're going to take a short break. Please enjoy the evening." Then the music stopped. The band members began quietly packing up their instruments. Guests looked around, confused, assuming this was just a regular break. But then the bar staff began closing down their stations, covering bottles, and dismantling their setup. The waiters started removing the elaborate floral centerpieces from the tables, carrying them away to storage. People began whispering, looking around for explanation. Patricia's face went from confused to alarmed. She stood up and marched toward me. "Margaret, what is happening? Why is the band leaving? Why are they taking the flowers?" I looked at her calmly. "The reception is over. I've ended it early." Her mouth fell open. "You've what?" Caroline appeared at her mother's side, her face red with anger. "You can't end the reception early. There are 200 people here. This is insane." I smiled pleasantly. "I can, actually. I paid for everything, which means I can cancel anything I want. The band is done. The bar is closed. Dessert is canceled. People are welcome to stay and chat, but the party part of this party is over." Thomas reached us, looking bewildered. "Maggie, what are you doing? What's going on?" I turned to him, and I felt surprisingly calm. I'm setting a boundary, Thomas. All day, your mother and sister have controlled every aspect of this wedding. They've dismissed my opinions, insulted my family, and treated me like an unwelcome addition to the Brennan family rather than a person you chose to marry. I've been accommodating. I've been understanding. I've been flexible. And they've interpreted all of that as weakness and an invitation to walk all over me. Patricia's face was turning an alarming shade of purple. This is outrageous. You're embarrassing the entire family. People traveled to be here. They expected a proper reception. I laughed, a real laugh this time. People expected what you promised them without consulting me. This was supposed to be Thomas's and my wedding, but you turned it into the Patricia and Caroline show. So now the show is over. Everyone can go home. Guests were starting to gather their things, looking confused and uncomfortable. Some of my friends caught my eye, and I could see they were trying not to smile. They knew what I'd been dealing with. My mother approached me and hugged me tightly. "Good for you, sweetheart," she whispered. "Good for you." My brother gave me a thumbs up from across the room. Even some of the Brennan relatives looked more amused than upset. Apparently, Patricia and Caroline's controlling behavior was well known in the family, and seeing someone finally stand up to them was entertaining. Thomas pulled me aside, away from his mother and sister, who were now loudly complaining to anyone who would listen. "Maggie, I understand you're upset, but this is extreme. These people are our guests. We can't just kick them out." I looked at the man I'd just married and felt a deep sadness settle over me. "Thomas, I'm not kicking anyone out. They're welcome to stay as long as they like. They just won't have entertainment or alcohol or flowers or any of the other expensive things I paid for while being treated like a servant in my own life." He ran his hands through his hair, frustrated. "Why didn't you talk to me before doing this? We could have worked something out." That made me angry again. "I've been talking to you for 6 months, Thomas. Every time your mother changed something without asking me, I told you. Every time Caroline dismissed my ideas, I told you. Every time I felt ignored and disrespected, I told you. And every single time, you told me to be patient, to be understanding, to let it go because they mean well. When exactly were you planning to stand up for me?" He didn't have an answer for that. He looked at the floor, at the ceiling, at the remaining guests, anywhere but at me. "They're my family," he finally said. "I love them." I nodded. "I know you do. But I'm your family now, too. Or, at least I'm supposed to be. And tonight, you've made it very clear where your priorities lie." He reached for my hand, but I stepped back. "I need some space right now, Thomas. I'm going to go change out of this dress and go home. You should probably stay and help your mother and sister manage their embarrassment." His face crumpled. "You're leaving? On our wedding night?" I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw a man who was kind and intelligent and good-hearted, but who would always choose his mother's feelings over mine when push came to shove.
Yes.
"I'm leaving. Because staying here and pretending everything is fine would be a lie, and I'm done lying to make other people comfortable." I walked away from him, past Patricia, who was loudly telling people that I was having some kind of breakdown, past Caroline, who was on her phone probably calling people to complain about me, past tables of confused guests, and out of the ballroom. I took the elevator up to the bridal suite where I'd gotten ready earlier. My friends Laura and Rachel followed me, having seen the whole thing and correctly guessing where I'd go. "That was the most badass thing I've ever seen," Rachel said as soon as the door closed behind us. Laura helped me out of my dress, carefully hanging it up while I changed into the jeans and sweater I'd brought for traveling to our honeymoon. Except there wouldn't be a honeymoon now. We were supposed to fly to Hawaii tomorrow morning. I couldn't imagine getting on that plane with Thomas after everything that had happened. "Are you okay?" Laura asked, sitting beside me on the couch. I thought about it honestly. I don't know. I'm angry. I'm sad. I'm relieved. I'm terrified. I just blew up my wedding reception and probably my marriage, and I have no idea what happens next. Rachel poured me a glass of water from the mini fridge. "What happens next is you figure out what you want. Not what Thomas wants, not what his nightmare family wants. What you want." We sat there for a while, the three of us, in the quiet of the hotel room while 2 floors below my wedding reception died its early death. Eventually, my phone started buzzing with texts. Thomas asking where I was, asking if we could talk. My brother saying he was proud of me and offer me a place to stay. My mother saying she loved me and I could come home anytime. Patricia, somehow having gotten my number, sending a long text about how disappointed she was in my behavior and how I'd humiliated the family. I turned off my phone. I'm going to get a different room here at the hotel for tonight, I decided. I need to sleep and think and figure out what I'm going to do tomorrow. Laura and Rachel both offered to stay with me, but I needed to be alone. They hugged me tight, promised to check on me in the morning, and left. I went down to the front desk, still in my jeans and sweater, and asked if there were any rooms available. The desk clerk, who'd clearly heard about the wedding situation, was discreetly sympathetic and gave me a room on a different floor under my maiden name. I spent my wedding night alone in a hotel room, still wearing my wedding rings, ordering room service, and watching mindless television. I didn't cry. I felt too numb for tears. I just sat there and processed the fact that I'd taken control of the most out-of-control day of my life, and now I had to live with the consequences. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to hear what happened after this dramatic night. We're building an incredible community, and we'd love to have you with us on the journey to 1,000 subscribers. Hit that button now. The next morning, I woke up to 73 text messages and 15 voicemails. Most were from Thomas, ranging from confused to angry to apologetic. A few were from friends checking if I was okay. Several were from Brennan family members expressing various levels of outrage. One was from Caroline calling me selfish and immature. One was from Patricia's lawyer. Apparently, she'd contacted a lawyer the night of the wedding, asking about reimbursement for emotional damages. I almost laughed at that one. I ignored all of them and called the airline. I canceled Thomas's ticket to Hawaii and changed mine to a solo trip. The representative asked if everything was okay, and I said, "It will be. Eventually." Then I called the hotel in Maui and confirmed my reservation, changing it from the honeymoon suite to a regular ocean view room. If I was going to process the implosion of my marriage, I might as well do it somewhere beautiful. Before I left for the airport, I met Thomas in the hotel restaurant for breakfast. He looked terrible, like he hadn't slept at all. His eyes were red, and his tie was crooked. "Maggie, we need to talk about what happened," he started as soon as I sat down. I held up a hand. "We do.
But not right now."
Right now, I'm going to Hawaii alone because I need space and time to think. When I get back in a week, we can talk about whether this marriage is something we both actually want." He looked stricken. "Of course I want our marriage. I love you. Last night was just a misunderstanding that got out of hand." I shook my head. "Thomas, it wasn't a misunderstanding. Your mother and sister have been controlling every aspect of our relationship since the day I met them, and you've let them. Last night was just the culmination of months of disrespect." I reached my breaking point. He reached across the table for my hand. "I'll talk to them. I'll set boundaries. I'll make this right." I let him hold my hand, but didn't squeeze back. "Thomas, you've been saying you'll set boundaries for 6 months. You've had 100 opportunities to stand up for me, and you haven't taken any of them. Last night, when your mother gave that toast that didn't even mention my name, when your sister basically told me I wasn't good enough for your family, you said they meant well. That's not protecting me. That's enabling them."
His jaw tightened.
"They're difficult, I know that. But they're my family. I can't just cut them off." I nodded. "I'm not asking you to cut them off. I'm asking you to prioritize your wife. I'm asking you to create a boundary between your marriage and your mother's need for control. If you can't do that, then we don't have a future together." I stood up, leaving my coffee untouched. "Think about that while I'm gone. Really think about it." I flew to Maui that afternoon. The plane was full of honeymooning couples, all holding hands and looking excited. I sat in my window seat alone, watching the clouds, and felt a strange sense of peace. Yes, my marriage was potentially over before it even really began. Yes, I'd just had the most dramatic wedding night in Portland history. Yes, I'd spent $45,000 on a reception I'd ended 3 hours early. But I'd also finally stood up for myself. I'd set a boundary. I'd said no to people who'd never heard that word before. And that felt powerful. Hawaii was beautiful. I spent my days walking on the beach, reading books, and swimming in the clear blue water. I didn't post anything on social media. I didn't call anyone except my mother once to let her know I was safe. I just existed in the moment, letting the sun and salt water heal something inside me that I hadn't realized was broken. On the third day, I met an older woman at the hotel pool. Her name was Dorothy, and she was there celebrating her 50th wedding anniversary alone because her husband had passed away 6 months earlier. The story of our wedding has become legendary in our friend group. People still talk about the bride who canceled her own reception mid-party. Some people think I was dramatic. Some people think I was brave. I think I was just done being pushed around. That night in the hotel ballroom, when I made those phone calls and shut everything down, I took control of my own life. I stopped being accommodating to people who saw accommodation as weakness. I set a boundary that was loud and public and impossible to ignore. Would I recommend ending your wedding reception early as a problem-solving technique? Probably not. It's extreme, expensive, and guaranteed to create family drama for years. But would I do it again given the same circumstances? Absolutely. Because sometimes the only way to make people hear you is to do something so dramatic, so unexpected, so completely out of character that they have no choice but to pay attention. Subscribe now if you haven't already. We're almost at 1,000, and your support means we can keep bringing you these incredible real-life stories. Looking back, I realized that wedding night was the best thing that could have happened to my marriage. It forced Thomas to really choose between keeping his mother happy and building a life with me. It showed me that I had more strength than I'd given myself credit for. It set the tone for our entire relationship going forward. We were partners, equals, and no one else got a vote in how we lived our lives. The $45,000 we spent on that wedding wasn't wasted. It was the price of clarity. The price of learning exactly who Thomas was under pressure. The price of discovering that I could stand up for myself even when everyone thought I was wrong. My mother likes to joke that I'm the only person she knows who paid $45,000 for a 3-hour party and considered it money well spent.
She's not wrong.
That night taught me more about myself and my relationship than years of smooth sailing ever could have. It taught me that love isn't enough if it's not backed up by action. It taught me that family can be chosen and boundaries can be set. It taught me that sometimes being the villain in someone else's story means being the hero in your own. So yes, at my wedding, my family tried to control everything. I went to the kitchen, made some phone calls, and shut the whole thing down. People called me crazy, dramatic, unreasonable, and selfish. But I also heard the words I needed to hear: brave, strong, self-respecting, and done taking nonsense. 3 years later, I'm still married to Thomas. We're happy. We're a team. And his mother has never again tried to move my mother's place card at a family gathering. Sometimes you have to blow up a reception to build a marriage. Sometimes the most mature thing you can do is say enough is enough. Sometimes walking into a kitchen and canceling everything is the first step toward getting everything you actually need. And if you've stayed with me until the end of this journey, do me one last favor and hit that subscribe button. Help us reach 1,000 subscribers. You've been part of this story, now be part of this community.